Oando PLC, a major indigenous energy company listed on the Nigerian Exchange Limited and the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, has announced an additional 7-day delay in the release of its 2023 audited financial statement. Originally scheduled for October 23, 2024, the financials now have a revised publication date of November 1, 2024, due to further audit processes tied to a recent acquisition. Oando confirmed that the Audit Committee and Board provisionally approved the financials on October 23, but additional time was requested by the auditors to finalize their opinion. Once approved by the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, the results will be published on the NGX and GSE. Oando appreciates its stakeholders' patience. Of course, that's the message it sends to its stakeholders, telling them that it appreciates their patience and for bearing with it during this particular time. Femi Oladehin, Senior Partner, Argentil Capital Management Limited, joins me for more on this. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Perpetua.
All right. I just say we are back to what Oando is known for. You may beg to differ, it's okay, but I mean, this is what Oando is known for: defaults and delays in filing its results. I mean, this may be disappointing for shareholders.
Look, I do understand your comments, around the reporting cycle for Oando. I think it's important to realize that the last 5 years prior to the recent acquisition have been particularly challenging for the organization, especially the regulatory interventions and all of the things that have happened. But one thing that's clear is anyone who understands big acquisitions such as the one that Oando has just completed knows that auditors are usually very, very careful when such acquisitions have occurred, and especially if they occur before final audits have been completed. So this is not something that is extremely unusual in the market, especially when a large acquisition like this is happening. And one of the other things that Oando has probably mentioned is the fact that there is a process. The audited reports were almost due for finalization before the closing of the acquisition from NAOC. And the implication was that the auditors decided that this acquisition was so significant that they had to look at the impact of that acquisition on the results of the company. And what we call a post-balance sheet event has occurred that is of significant effect on the well-being or the going forward operations of the company. And what we've experienced here is the auditors, again, expressing their independence by saying that we need to take a look at this acquisition, understand what it means for the company, and we have to be able to offer an opinion on the basis of that.
Well, we've seen renewed interest and rally in this particular stock. I mean, don't you think Oando should have probably done better, whether it is in its communication or something?
Well, I think that the company has been very transparent in its communication, in fairness. The reality is that from the moment the acquisition took place, the first press release suggested that there are likely to be delays in the finalization of their audits. And one thing that Oando has been very good at is actually, putting out public statements to reflect whatever it was that was going on in the company. And during that period, I think there are probably 2 or 3 press releases that have come out as a result of this. One thing that we must always remember is that this is a company that, effectively today is probably one of the largest upstream operators in the country, and perhaps even the one who has the largest footprint when it comes to operatorship. And that means that the demands for its accounting are significantly higher. Also, Oando is a multi-jurisdictional operational company, which means that they have assets and operations outside of Nigeria, which have to be reported on. And then in addition to that, they need to then combine the reports of these different organizations. And these companies are, to the best of my knowledge, are audited by different accounting firms as well. So just bringing all of this together can be daunting in some instances. But I think one thing we should be clear about is that I believe that the fact that this transaction has now closed, Oando has clarity as to what its operations are going forward. this sort of delays should become a thing of the past. And to also mention that what is actually being delayed is the audited report. You remember that the management reports have been released in due course over the last few quarters. Yeah.
Okay, now I think I'll just take you to this now. Just so we're clear right now, companies are actually releasing their Q3 or 9-month 2024 unaudited results. But here we're expecting Oando's audited, financial year 2023 results. Is this about, Oando having a different period? What's the period really?
No, so look, Oando's accounting period is 31st of December, as with everyone else. What has happened though is that at the beginning of the year, they had announced the completion of their 2023 management accounts. You must also remember that Oando is suffering from the overhang of the SEC intervention. The SEC intervention meant that the auditors were stopped from working. Oando had to go through a transition of auditors as a result of the SEC intervention, or as a follow-on from the SEC intervention, not necessarily directly, but the previous auditors had spent 10 years. Corporate governance meant they needed to switch auditors. Now, the truth is that when you switch auditors, it's not as straightforward for someone else to step in and continue to audit the company, especially a company that had been under regulatory intervention. And then the audits, the new auditors had to walk through the 2022, 2023, in fact, from 2021 financial statements and walk through that and issue those reports. One thing that we can all agree on is that the reporting cycle for Oando should actually go back to normal. And what the company has more or less insinuated in its report is that from the completion of this cycle, then we should go back to a period where results are announced within the due periods. So I'm also expecting that once these audited reports are finalized, hopefully by Friday, as the company has suggested, the next step obviously would then be for us to see the third quarter results, which at that point would incorporate the new operations that they've only just taken over. And you know that the market had reacted positively to the news coming out of Oando since middle of July, just before this transaction closed. My expectation is that this will continue just because nothing really has changed. What is outstanding for Oando is to release the results and continue its trajectory.
All right, I think I'll take this excuse. I mean, compared to the other one you talked about, Oando operating from different jurisdictions, it's not only Oando. We have Airtel Africa, some of the companies that operate from different jurisdictions, and they, give us their results at the right time. But away from that, Oando was suspended by NGX Reg. Go talk to us. Do you think, or do you see the suspension affecting the company in any way, especially looking at investor sentiment and, things in that regard?
Look, I mean, any negative news would always impact the company. And the suspension of the shares could be considered a negative news. But I think that one of the things you understand about the market is that the stock market and the Nigerian stock market is an efficient market. It's going to price in every information that comes in. When these results are released on Friday, as promised by the company, people are going to look at the results and not the process that led to the results. If the results continue to reflect a company that's in recovery, that is looking to grow, that is forward-looking, I think the market will continue to look at the company positively and see the fact that there is value on the go-forward basis. No one buys a stock because of historical results. You buy it because of the future, because you have an outlook for the future that's positive. And I think that's where the Oando story becomes interesting. Now, to make it even perhaps more interesting is that in the sector where Oando is playing, there's a lot of good news that is coming out of that sector. We know that, for example, Seplat just announced approval for the acquisition. So there are a number of positive news that generally impact the oil and gas sector. And you expect that stocks like Oando would always benefit, especially if the regulatory overhang is a thing of the past. So I do not have significant concerns that we may see a pullback maybe for the one day on the first day after those results are announced, or after the suspension is lifted. But the trajectory for that stock is definitely positive.
Right. Well, part of the business dream of Oando Energy Resources Nigeria Limited sort of includes sustaining investment in the upstream subsector of the oil and gas industry, and it's talking about a target of delivering 100,000 barrels per day production over the next 5 years. Plus, in addition, and that's also in addition to the 1.5 billion standard cubic feet of gas. Talk to us about this.
So this is quite important. I mean, one of the reasons why, if you recall the conversation when they made the second acquisition of buying out NAOC and becoming the operators, one thing that was very clear for them was that they were able to go into that operation and optimize it and bring the productions back to levels seen earlier on in the first decade of buying into those assets. Now, the company has hinted that its intervention or its acquisition of NAOC is going to immediately translate into increased production. And I think the Q3 numbers are going to be something that we should be looking out for to see how that directly translates to their underlying numbers. But at 100,000 barrels target and 1.5 billion scoff of gas on a production, you're literally talking about a company that is 3 times the current size of Oando, or 3 times the revenues, the current revenues of the company. And I believe that given the experience of the team, given the experience of the management that they've gained over the last 10 years, there is some light at the end of this tunnel that shows that those production numbers are possible, and with continued investments in its upstream operations and just ensuring continued investment in security as well, ensuring security of production. This could be very interesting times for Oando, but I believe that 100,000 barrels is achievable because that asset used to produce over 250,000 barrels at its peak. So 100,000 barrels should be easily achievable once there's some investment in infrastructure.
But my guess is this is something you want investors to sort of monitor closely, especially, of course, shareholders.
Yes, and look, the thing with shows like this is that it's not our job to tell investors what to do. It's our job to give them the information that they need to be able to make the right decisions. But I would say that just looking at the entire oil and gas space, especially with the upstream players and the development with the Dangote refinery, it's got to be a positive outlook for that sector. Yes, we have no control over the price of crude, but as long as they continue to increase production, ensure efficiency in their operations, everyone in that sector should have positive reports. And Oando probably looks even the best positioned to show that upshift in its numbers.
All right, let me take you on this one now. Looking at some of Oando's assets in River State, you have all mining leases 60, 61, 62, and 63. What's the plan for community engagement so we can ensure a more conducive business environment? And you can also add to that plans for reducing environmental impact and ensuring that, we do not go back to the stories we used to have before now. I mean, one of the reasons why we're having some of these IOCs leave in their droves.
No, so that's a very important question. So let me just give you some news I'm privy to. The moment Oando announced the acquisition of NAOC, some of the communities, as you know, we advise a number of oil and gas assets in those communities. Some of the communities immediately started to reduce some of their demands from the previous operators, just understanding that this is a Nigerian company. Now, put that beside the fact that Oando as a company has always been pro the community, from the Oando Foundation to its engagements across different parts of the country, even in places where it's not having operations. So the ESG component of Oando's social impact has always been very key for them. And we believe that with a Nigerian operatorship across all of the sector, this is going to be positive for those communities because Nigerians care about Nigerians, right? And what we want to do is build a country that we can all feel part of and feel proud of. And companies like Oando will definitely be able to speak the language that the communities understand. They will be able to hire local members of the community into a community type office and community engagement office, and ensure that the interventions that they take are deliberately curated to answer the community's questions. So bringing that into your second question, which was around how does that impact the environment? I want to believe that companies like Oando, being local companies, would care more about the environment than the IOCs. And if there's anything that we all should take out of these divestments by the IOCs, is that we can now demand more from local companies who have to report to their shareholders on a regular basis. And those shareholders are Nigerians, not some obscure person in China or in Italy or in Brazil, but these are Nigerians who should care about the local environment. And I think that should be positive for the market.
All right, on a very light note now, I mean, do you get scared when you see Oando shares, just moving like a pendulum or something? It's up today, it's in the suits category today, tomorrow it's no longer there. I mean, what do you think? What's happening? What's the playbook here? Sometimes I wonder what's going on.
So look, I've been in this market. I've been following the Nigerian stock market since 1994. So that's 30 years of understanding how the market operates. The reality is that one of the first things I learned as a trader in those days was that stocks can go up and come down.
But this one is happening too often. Actually, 1 week up, next week down. It's just happening that way.
So the interesting thing, Perpetua, is that volatility is actually good for a market. Because what volatility helps you do is it helps you average down when you've bought at a high. But if the price just keeps going up, right, there's no way for you to manage on a daily basis your portfolio. And one of the things that I think we should also preach to people is what I'll call diversification. You shouldn't hold one asset or one stock. Make sure that you have a diversified portfolio across sectors, across different parts of the economy. And what happens is that as a portfolio, you should be able to then say that, look, I'm better off in the long run. But look, a company like Oando has been more volatile this year. But I'll tell you that the shareholders are happy because of that volatility.
All right, thank you so much, Femi Oladehin, senior partner, Argentil Capital Management Limited, for sharing this with us.